everybody. Welcome to my second podcast. I'm more than honoured that you're actually listening to this. Whilst we're on that subject, thank you for listening to my first podcast. I got quite a few messages saying that they enjoyed it and it was a great subject matter. My name's Glenn Hallam and I'm in my studio in Corby in Northamptonshire. And talking of messages, a few people messaged me and said, where is Corby in Northamptonshire? Well, Corby in Northamptonshire is right in the middle of England in the UK. I neglected to mention that last time. It turns out that the guy that sent me a message on Twitter was actually in America and he had no idea where Corby in Northamptonshire was. Well, there's a lot of places in America I don't know, so you can be forgiven for that. But I was very proud that somebody so far away actually heard me talk about my early sort of music experiences. Now, talking about early music experiences, I started playing drums, in my first podcast I mentioned I was about 7 years old but couldn't remember any earlier, although my parents had said that I'd started earlier. And it got me thinking because in when I talked about that, I kind of jumped to the 2020s where we are now, and there's a big bit in the middle that we haven't covered. Now, being a child in the 70s was very different to being a child now. And I went to a school called Eastleigh Junior School, which was in a small town called Burton Latimer, which is, I guess, about 5-6 miles away from where I am right now. And, school was very different back then. And mainly because, it's a different part of our lives. It was a long time ago. And when we used to go to school, music lessons themselves were a major part of that learning. Unlike now, where music can be sort of tossed aside for the more academic subjects. The things are changing. People's views of how education should happen have changed a lot. Although it does annoy me a little bit that music is kind of tossed aside and, left for them odd afternoons. But that said, when we were at school in our primary school, and it was actually called a junior school then, and the junior school that I went to had music lessons probably 2 or 3 times a week alongside your other academic subjects. Now, this was great for me, but at that time, so we're talking round about 77, and I was born in 67. Yeah, that's a long time ago. So I'm 10 years old. And these music lessons often involved us kind of being shipped off into the school hall, and then one of the teachers would bring the music trolley, which would have your maracas and tambourines. And if you were lucky, the music trolley would probably have one of those little tiny snare drums on. And the teacher would stand in front of the class and talk about what they're going to do. And they would hand out these musical instruments to each one of us. And I would sit there praying to get the drum. Because at that particular time, I hadn't told anybody that I played drums. Now, I'm 10 years old now. So I've been doing it for a few years as a child. And on many occasions, I landed up with the silly maraca that I didn't want. But this particular day, I got the snare drum. And of course, came with a couple of sticks so I could play. And instantly, I started rolling on it and playing these marching rhythms. And the teacher was like, wow, what's going on here? We didn't know this. And not only did the teachers get excited, but my other class friends got excited and thought, wow, how do you do that? How do you do this? And so it kind of started there in primary school. So I got quite a lot of attention for that. So what happened from there on in, you'd often have the national anthem playing at assembly. And obviously the national anthem has this really long drum roll at the beginning. So guess who started to do it? Yeah, I would do it at the beginning of assembly. And I remember having to do it on a really hot sports day and sat by the piano player, which was one of the teachers. and had to do this drum roll, and that was a big gig for a 10-year-old. So that was pretty cool. Now, because of primary school, I got a lot of attention because I could play the drums. So moving forward a couple of years, or 1 year if you like, because I was 10, 11 years old, I joined secondary school. And secondary school is a big leap when you're that age, and it is now. And so when I started secondary school, did I tell anybody that I played drums? No, it was very strange. It wasn't as cool as it probably is now to play a musical instrument, because people were into other things, and if you played a musical instrument, you were one of those kids that went down the music block, and people kind of rolled their eyes. It wasn't as cool as what it was, as what you'd have thought. And so I kept my mouth shut, and so I didn't say anything. But as with I've just mentioned, that music lessons were very different back then, and they were still part of the curriculum. We could have a music lesson every week, but it was the boring lesson. It's not very exciting. Oh, we got music this afternoon. Well, because music was that a little bit more focused than it is now, they would have a dedicated music block, and of course you had your music lessons there. So if you had your music lessons there, we walked it. So I don't know what day it was, say a Wednesday afternoon, we had a music lesson. For the first time, I walked into this music block and into the classroom, and it's kind of broken off into all these practice rooms, but the main classroom, there is a blue Premier drum set. Now I'm like looking at this going, holy moly, this is so cool. Now bearing in mind, I'd never told anybody that I played drums, and I still kept my mouth shut. So I remember sneakily asking the teacher, are we allowed to play on the drum set? And all that nervousness about me telling people that I played drums was slowly creeping out of me, and I wanted to have a go at this drum kit. Well, this went on quite a while, and no, I didn't get to play on the drum set, and I still kept my mouth shut about playing the drums. But then the music teacher, Mr. Wearmouth, I remember him, and I used to work with another teacher called Mrs. Davis, who happened to be my form tutor later on in school. But they put a note out to all the classes, and they said that if anybody would like to play the drum set, after school we're having a class. And I suppose it was because lots of people had said that I want to go on the drum set, and it wasn't allowed. I suppose they thought it was noisy and people couldn't play. So they put this class together. So after school, the bell goes, and a bunch of people head down to the music block. Those people that fancied having to go on the drum set. Now, prior to this, the rumors went round school. Right, Mr. Wearmouth was doing this drum class, and we could have a go at the drum set. So during that time, I still didn't say anything, but I was hearing rumors about all those people that could play drums. There was, I remember the name Charlie. I don't know why. Charlie could play drums. Such and such could play drums. Such and such could play drums. And I'm thinking, oh my word, I'm not the only one. And that made me really nervous because, again, I still hadn't said anything. Anyway, it gets to this Wednesday night or whenever it was, and we all pile into the music block. And this is after school. We all pile into the music block, and the class is full. There's probably about, if my memory serves me right, there's probably about 25, 30 people. And I'm sitting there all quietly, and all those names that said they could play drums, or we'd heard that they could play drums, were all there. And Mr. Wearmouth, the music teacher, had moved the piano, and the drum set was next to it in front of the class. And it was one of them well, it's not so old-fashioned because they still exist now, but it kind of stepped up. So we all sat up like an auditorium does, although a lot smaller. So yeah, like I said, 25, 30 people. So Mr. Wearmouth sits there and he starts telling you what the drum kit is and, rhythms and stuff. I can't remember, the kind of things he was saying. And so what he described was that everybody was going to have a go at the drum set with him playing piano. And I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be fun, but I'm still incredibly nervous. And so the tune they're going to pick is Hawaii Five-0. Now, in my last podcast, I mentioned about I would watch TV with my mum, and I knew this theme music because it kind of started with this kind of big drum fill, and off it went. And so I knew the tune already. So I'm sitting there and I'm incredibly nervous because I'm wondering whether I'm going to play it in front of all these people. But I'm not picked first, which is kind of a good thing. And so one lad's picked, he sits at the drums, and, he sounds like he's falling down the stairs and he's just hitting stuff. And then they start picking some of those names that apparently could play drums. And, of course, they sounded like they were falling down the stairs as well. Because I suppose everybody thought, well, you're only hitting it, it's going to be easy. So, but the thing is, this went on a little bit because, like I said, there's about 20 odd people there, and so me sitting there quietly keeping my trap shut, I've got it nailed in my head. I've so got this song nailed. I've got the groove, I got the fill at the beginning, I've got everything, and I'm still keeping it to myself. I'm not selling the next to, oh, I know how to do that. I'm just keeping completely stum totally. And anyway, they call me up. So I sit at the drums, having watched them and heard everybody else and heard the tune probably 15 times now. Like I said, I got it. And so then my music teacher turns around and said, right, we want this big fill at the beginning and then we're going to go in. Well, I did it. I counted him off. I was counting 1, 2, 3, da, da, and then he starts playing the melody of the song, and I'm laying out this groove completely and utterly, and he just stopped playing, and he said, "You play drums?" And I said, "Yeah." And he was gobstruck that I could do this, and the whole class went totally quiet with it because they were shocked that I could sort of pull it off straight away. And from that moment, I was asked to join the school band, the school brass band, the orchestra, and yes, yours truly landed up playing for those bands and doing all the school events. And through those years, all of a sudden, I become the go-to drummer. And it was an amazing sort of step into that world. And because I became somebody. I wasn't just this quiet. I wasn't the cleverest kid at school. There's no two ways about it. I didn't enjoy it. And what happened, it gave me that thing where I wanted to go to school. And it was exciting because people liked it. Although I was nervous originally to let on that I could play, I spent most of my breaks going down the music block, but it still wasn't that cool. It wasn't totally cool to go down there. You were considered to be a bit of an intellect, and music wasn't that, it wasn't that thing that you did. But until one of the sixth form guys played guitar. Now, we had a dedicated sixth form block, and he was actually, I didn't realize at the time, but he was actually at that class and I realized what he was doing in the end. And the guy was named Mark. I remember, heaven knows what he's doing now, but he kind of picked up on me and said, well, I've got a rock band. And it was kind of like of the time, it was the Black Sabbath, it was the Deep Purple, it was kind of that sort of stuff. And he said, would you like to be our drummer? And of course the answer was yes. And because he was part of the sixth form and the school allowed them to practice after school, and that's what I did. So I started getting into the, that rock stuff at that early age by playing with them. And then I used to hang out at his house, and he worked for a local a record store. It was called Revolver. I don't know whether Revolver was a nationwide thing, but there was this shop in Kettering, and of course he would have all these latest albums. And he would bring, like, I remember hearing "Wish You Were Here" from Pink Floyd for the first time ever, and it was via him. He brought this album in, so I'd said, "Can you get me a copy?" And then I'd be spending my pocket money getting these records and listening to them, and that's how I really got into buying records. And so he was a massive step in what later become who I am now. So, and that was amazing. So we even did assemblies with that. I will tell you a short story where I got in trouble for playing music. And bearing in mind, it's the 70s, well, just about now. We're getting a little bit into the early 80s. I'm not too sure when this changed, I have to say. But this particular day, they'd set up, the sixth form guys would set up all their instruments in the sixth form block. And they brought the drum kit into the sixth form block. But of course, I was only a year 1 or 2. I can't remember. Bearing in mind, year 1 is the first year of secondary school. It's very different now. That would be year 7, but that's another conversation. So I was in year 1 or 2. You're not allowed to go in the sixth form block. You do not do that. But what they did, they let me in the back door of the sixth form block, so I could sit to the drums and we could have a jam at break time. It's drums. What was I thinking? Of course they're gonna hear me, and because I'd done so much drum stuff throughout the couple of years that I was there, they knew damn well it was me. They knew it was me, and so I was warned and kicked out of the sixth form block because they heard me playing. And I think the head of year had an office in the same building. Yeah, I should have thought about it. But again, single-minded drum kit play. And so they sneak me back in through the same door, and I started playing again. And he went nuts. How I thought he wouldn't hear me, I don't know, but hey, it did happen. He went nuts, and unfortunately, it was the time in schooling where they had such a thing as being caned. Yeah, I got caned for playing a musical instrument and playing drums. I guess I broke the rules, but it was a different time, and thankfully they do not do that now. It's just the whole thing of being told off for playing drums would annoy me in the first place, but to have that, no. Well, I'm glad we don't. I'm glad we're in a different time now. But yeah, so I got the cane for doing that, literally lifting the back of the Blazer up, and there it is. So that was still didn't stop me playing drums though. So that's how I became the drummer at Latimer Comprehensive. And the strange thing is that even now the school is still open, and some of my students that visit me actually go to that school. It's changed a lot, of course, and actually my older children have been through that as well. And it's quite amazing when you think about it. They do have a decent music program, I think, from what I hear. Being now with the pandemic, a lot of people are doing it online, of course. But so that's how I started playing. Thereon after, I'll leave for next time. And but it certainly set me up, and I think that my point here to tell you that story is, I said earlier that I wasn't necessarily gifted with academic skills, but it got me into school, and I would look forward to going to the music block, and ultimately I guess it made me study my other lessons I would enjoy more, because I'd always have that one thing to look forward to. And I think that in our modern kind of schooling with music, it shouldn't be forgotten that music can encourage you actually and help you with other subjects. And I think that's what it did to me. And I like to think that that's what some of my students come here, and they're encouraged to go and learn other things, and because they're looking forward to the music lesson, they've got to go to school because they've got the music lesson. And so it just, you never know who you're going to come across. Some of these kids are brilliant, and they can go on to bigger, better things. So that's it. That's my schooling. It was all about playing drums. Once again, I'm really grateful for you listening. I hope you've enjoyed my story. please do contact me. I want to hear your stories. That's what this is all about. I said in the first one, let's hear your stories, even if it's about going to school and your experiences playing music or singing or whatever. I don't care. It's really interesting, and if we can encourage the younger generation to start doing this, then we're doing a good thing. So thank you for listening. We will see you again next time, hopefully. Take care of yourself and keep safe.
Jitterbop, 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 we're gonna rock a jitterbop, 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 we're gonna rock and she's my jitterbop, baby.